Thank you all and welcome to our meeting today. This meeting is being held remotely due to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. Minnesota Statute Section 13D.021 allows us to hold remote meetings during the pandemic because in-person meetings or a meeting conducted under Section 13D.02 is not practical or prudent because of a health pandemic or an emergency declared under Chapter 12. Chair Jeff Ettinger.
Thanks so much, Commissioner. Welcome to the council. So it's September 15th, a mere 2 months ago, that we met as a council for the first time under the governor and lieutenant governor. Since that time, we have listened to and interacted with a couple dozen of community, business, labor, tribal, and nonprofit leaders. We've established guiding principles using group input and collaboration. We've determined 8 theme areas and 21 top strategic ideas. And we've arrived at the 5 top priority strategies. And all of this is embodied in the recommendations document that was so expertly prepared by staff and which you all should have received a couple of days ago. But this really is, to me, is remarkable work product in 2 short months from 15 volunteers who have all sorts of other responsibilities, helped obviously by 3 very dedicated commissioners and their very talented staff. But today we're at the finish line of our phase 1 sprint, and I just want to thank the council members for the spirit of diligence and respect that has really reigned during this fast but well done 2 months of work. At the start here, we want to thank everyone for your work in prioritizing our recommendations to the governor and lieutenant governor. That last exercise that we asked folks to do Tuesday and Wednesday of this preceding week. Nick has put up the 5 top priorities that emerged in the vote. So it's producing new affordable housing, reskilling and upskilling through industry partnerships, creating a BIPOC small business ecosystem investment package, ensuring broadband access through Minnesota, and investments in opportunity workforce, youth workforce, I'm sorry. And then I think we also have the final ranking of the themes. Thank you all for taking the time to do the theme work one more time. The ranking right now in terms of those 5 ideas. So you can see there was a, at least 2 dot drop off before anything below those top 5. And then we will move on to the themes. And no radical changes here, and all 8 of them is our intention to communicate. They're in the recommendations and to communicate during our formal presentation in 2 weeks. So today's agenda, our job is to approve these recommendations. This is going to require a formal motion and second and a formal discussion period. Sorry for all the formalities and Robert's rules and all that, but it's been able to get by without those in these preceding meetings, but we really need to have that vote, and ultimately it will be a roll call vote. We also then hope to have time to plan for our presentation on December 1st. And we're going to do some phase 2 planning with as much time as we have available after the vote and that other exercise occurs. We'll start with a large group overview of what deliverable, mind everyone, what was put out there in the order. And then we're going to go to our small groups for conversations on approach. There's a voting process slide, I believe, that staff would like to share at this point. Nick, do you want to walk them through it?
Yeah, so to conduct the vote, there is a general motion that will be put on the table. It needs to be formally proposed by a council member and seconded for it to be opened up for discussion. We'll then proceed to move into discussion, and then at a point when the council members no longer have any discussion items, a roll call vote will occur on whether to approve or not approve the motion. You can signify approval by indicating yay, and that you don't approve by indicating nay. I will be conducting a roll call and moving through the list alphabetically. If there are any changes that need to be made, to the recommendations, those will require a motion to amend, and we'll go through a similar process to propose changes and make any amendments. Any changes do need to be voted on by the council, and we'll conduct a roll call for those changes as well.
Thank you, Nick. So as established in the voting process and on the slide there, we definitely will have a discussion period after the motion and second. I do want to give council members an opportunity, though, before we get into that formal process, to bring anything to our attention or to, if you have any comments about where we sit right now, you're welcome to provide those at this time before the formal discussion. Okay, I'm not hearing any. So I will go ahead and place the motion into record. There's a motion to approve the recommendations to be passed as described in the recommendations report. Whereas the recommendations delivered to Governor Walz and Lieutenant Governor Flanagan consist of 8 themes and 21 overall strategies, drawing from the breadth of backgrounds and ideas of the council's membership. Whereas the recommendations also indicate which of the strategies the council believes are of greatest priority. Whereas the state of Minnesota staff supporting the council may further add or edit descriptions, content, narrative, or representation of the recommendations in order to better communicate the intent of the recommendations. I put that into motion and ask if there's a second.
Second.
Okay, so now we've had a motion and a second, and now it's time for discussion. And we certainly invite any discussion that any council members have at this time. Yeah, there's a hand raised. Oh, Nanoka, please go ahead.
That's me. Thank you. I just had a quick question regarding the recent infrastructure bill that came into the state that supports broadband access, that there's been money allocated specifically for broadband access. And just wondering how that impacts this group's decision whether or not to recommend broadband access to all Minnesota through this council.
Commissioner Grove, did you have, we had asked for initial input on that, and you had provided some, so maybe that would be a good place to start, but certainly we can have a broader discussion than that as well.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff, and it's a great question, Inoko. So we have taken a look at that funding, and it's quite the package, to be sure. Some of the money will be devoted to new broadband lines. Others will be on the demand side to help consumers pay for that broadband, and there's some digital equity money in there as well. So it's a really great package. Our calculation in looking at that funding is that even with that funding coming in, if we want to sort of finish the job in broadband, which has been the conversation of this council, we would still need about $170 million in state funding to fully cover the state. And so that is the dollar amount that you see in the recommendation right now, because the council has asked us indeed to provide that estimate. It was originally up in the sort of mid to high 2s, so it did bring that number down. But the infrastructure money doesn't complete the work for us, and so we made that financial adjustment. It's great news that bill passed, but still a need if we want to get expansive full state coverage to fund it.
I think I'd add, first of all, we recognize this as sort of a multi-stage process, that our recommendations were due to the governor here on November 15th. We're actually going to physically give it in 2 weeks when he's back in town. A lot of moving parts with that bill. There's obviously the Build Better, the BBB Act that's lurking out there as well as other things on the state level. And so a number of things. The governor will receive our input, he'll receive all sorts of other input, and then he will start on his discussions with the legislature as 2022 begins. So recognizing any new input like that really ought to be incorporated. And then secondly, I think the language was captured correctly in the recommendation document. We've all done the best we can with some very preliminary financial estimates on these proposals. But we all need to recognize that those numbers are clearly subject to change as the governor, lieutenant governor, and their team dig into some of these proposals and weigh them against others. And so not only will broadband could potentially change in terms of the amount they would actually recommend, but any number of our other proposals could well change in addition. Brett, I believe you had your hand up next.
I did, and this kind of followed on the same line of the comment that Nanoko had made, and I was just saying that, you know, and I just looking for more emphasis on, you know, we talked early on about the new energy economy and whether there were opportunities to add sort of energy into the fold, you know, in a way to kind of leverage some of the infrastructure dollars that are coming through there, and also to kind of leverage the leadership position we have on clean energy to you know, empower the state with everything from chargers to attracting electric vehicle automakers and that kind of thing. But just wanted to at least make that pitch. Steve, I mentioned it lightly to you, but just wanted to make a formal comment in this meeting.
I mean, clean energy again is something that also seems to have some money earmarked in the infrastructure bill from the federal government. Again, too early maybe to tell exactly what the Minnesota state impact will be. The one other I would point to, Brett, would be the skilling priority, which was our number 2 priority item. Specifically does call out energy as one of the fields that we would like to have the administration explore in terms of those industry partnerships with future employees. Was there another hand? I saw one at one point, but I'm not seeing it right now on my screen, at least.
It was probably mine. I put it down.
Okay, thank you, John. Yeah, Marcus, please.
Just to the point that you made on when you were reading off, you made a comment about the staff being able to change any language. Will that language change, if it's significant at all, come back to the council at all during this period of time? And given the language that we have in there, is that all set in stone, or are we going back to the intent of what we want to focus those investments on? So I know we have the BIPOC small business ecosystem as one of the items that are major in there. I just want to make sure that we have comprehensive language in there on how we want to make investments in BIPOC small businesses.
I mean, someone else, Paul, or someone else can contribute on this as well, but I would point to the fact that, Marcus, not only does that proposal have that specific kind of set of potential programs, but also the specific dollar amount, and that attachment to me will be part of what we present or provide to the governor. So that clearly will be in there. I mean, the intent today, obviously, as Nick mentioned, I mean, if we have somebody if we want to formally amend anything language-wise or otherwise with our proposal, we certainly can do that. Given our tight time frame, I mean, we're kind of looking to try to finalize these. And the intent with the staff clearly would be that there should not be material changes just done by staff, you know, between now and 2 weeks from now, or even after we submit it to the governor. But we all do need to recognize, and you know, as we've said all along, we're going to submit it to the governor. We're going to make our case when we collectively present that in 2 weeks. But after that, I mean, there's any number of changes that could be made to it. And I think Commissioner Harpstead pointed out her previous experience on a Blue Ribbon Commission where, you know, okay, the commission made recommendations, but that may not have been exactly what, you know, finally got adopted.
Jeff, I would agree wholeheartedly. What we passed today is what will go to the governor as our recommendations to the governor and the lieutenant governor. And again, as they take it from there, you know, into the legislative process, the governor and lieutenant governor need to make their choices and selections, and I'm assuming with the administration and commissioners will have input on that. But I really feel like what we're presenting is what we're going to pass today. That this is the best of our thinking, you know, in a short 8-week period, and that's what I think we're putting in front of them.
Okay.
I think
just want to make sure I make comment.
Yeah,
sure. I think Tracy and others mentioned the fact that when we present it in 2 weeks, they will have the written document that you've all seen, but we might want to have some presentation techniques that may enhance or make it easier to follow our presentation that staff would be gleaning from the materials. Penny, I think you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to speak to a couple things. It has been an accelerated process over these 8 weeks, and I just want to say that we had some conversation about mental health being so important to everybody's well-being going forward. I think in conversations with Commissioner Harpstead, with Sue Aberholden, with several others that have occurred since the last meeting, I think that's best to cross map and bring into a phase 2 activity. So I just wanted, I know that was ended up lower on the vote, but I just wanted to comment that still an important topic for people, I know, but I think there was some cross mapping that had to be done to do that most effectively. So just speaking to that, Jeff, and fully endorse of where we landed in terms of priorities for this phase.
Steve, did you have your hand up?
Just quickly, kind of building off both of what Marcus and Penny just said, I think there are varying level of details in each of the proposals, but most of them are quite broad. And I think in thinking about changes or adaptations or shifts that we might want to make at this stage of the game, anything that is substantive, of course, is welcome. But on the details, obviously, a lot of this is directional. And so knowing the direction the council thinks that we need to go is really going to help the governor. Even down to specific issues within the themes is really helpful. But the specifics are going to go through a whole series of additional conversations with staff. And so I think if there's a detail or two that don't fit perfectly with maybe how you would have written it or something, if it's that level of granularity or specificity that will get sort of ironed and massaged over time is probably all right, is my sense, versus if there's a bigger structural thing, it may be worth a discussion.
And there's no question that there will be other input. There's a process for other input. Experts in the mental health area, experts in the housing area, experts in skilling areas, et cetera, may well have other priorities or other things that they would like to get in front of the governor, and we'll have every opportunity to do that. We feel the process we've had has gotten us to I think, a very solid list of the recommendations on a broad basis, and will be of high use to the governor and lieutenant governor and the administration, but we will recognize it's not a perfect work product. Artie, please.
I guess I just am thinking about, and I know phase 2 is on our agenda for today, but I think to Penny's point, that none of these issues that are like none of the issues that the recommendations are trying to address are going to be resolved only through ARPA funds, right? And so I think just being really clear about like what is the parking lot if we had a chart, if we were using chart paper, right? Or if we want to go back to our Dear Jam boards, right? Like where could those potentially live? Because I do think as we have moved toward recommendation, there's been some anxiety that I've been hearing external to the council around like this being the be all end all, and it's not, right? And I think we need to hold that. I'm sure that's not how the governor and the lieutenant governor are holding it. But I think, you know, as we think about process into the second phase of our work, what does that parking lot look like? How do we come back to these issues? And I think mental health is one of them, where actually the anxiety that I've been hearing externally, the number of emails on that just this week alone. And so I do think that just thinking about how we hold process here is going to be really critical, because we are not going, I mean, as wonderful as this pot of money is, there are additional pots of money, hooray. And these are complex issues. And so I do think that there is something about that as we move forward in terms of what I mean, there are limitations here, but then I think how this fits into a next phase dialogue will be kind of important for us to be mindful of. And I think also as we, you know, not only for us in our own deliberations moving forward, but I think as we externalize that to the community that's watching is, I guess, what I'm saying.
I think that's really well said, Barty. And I think we will have the opportunity. We're going to start talking today about phase 2, but it's a longer process. And so I think we will have time to react to how other organizations look at our initial recommendations, where the administration seems to be heading with some, as we look to try to find some longer term recommendations on some of these important issues. Any other comments or discussion items at this point that anyone would like to bring up? Yes, Talia.
I just want to ask about how the process goes to the governor, lieutenant governor, to the legislation, and are we able to make any sort of input in terms of the process of accessing these resources from the ground? Are these allocations, appropriations, competitive grants?
I think I'll let one of the commissioners speak to that because they'd be more familiar with how the process works after our initial recommendations are provided.
Yes.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yes. All of the above.
All the above. Yeah.
Yeah. In terms of exactly how they get put into statute and move forward, it could be any of those.
It could be any of those from us, or it could be any of those along the way.
Along the way, after it, between here and statute.
I mean, I think it gets back to it was never our money to divvy out. It's only our task to make as strong a recommendation as we can to a respected group of people who earnestly tried to address that in a couple of months. And so though, I don't think there's a part of the process that requires anything from the government to keep checking back with us if they change anything. I think we just need to all understand that. But we also have a two-part process, and we're still in session and in effect all the way through June. So it's certainly possible that there could be interactions back and forth, both on our immediate recommendations and on our longer-term project.
Thank you.
Talia, just so my take on one portion of, I think, what your question was there is my hope is that eventually these dollars will go through legislative process and they may come out in allocations to agencies and allocations to communities and in competitive grant programs. My hope, and again, my perspective, my bias, is that solutions lie in communities, right? And my hope is that all these resources don't kind of flow through government only, right? And or through government programs, but that community, this is just my take on your question, but that community really have an opportunity to access these funds. So community-based organizations, capacity dollars, there's lots of ideas, I think, across many of these areas. Providers on the ground, nonprofits, right? Small businesses on the ground. To me, solutions lie in community, right? Not necessarily in programs and or in government, although clearly government is a key player in all of that. And again, that's a spirit that I've heard across many of our conversations and from many of our presenters. So that's just kind of my take on one portion of what you were asking about.
Are there any other discussion topics anybody would like to raise? Hearing none, I'll ask Nick then to proceed with the roll call vote.
I apologize. I'm late because I had technical issues.
I do. Please.
Can we go over? I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Can you say what we're voting on?
Sure. I will reread it because it's important that everyone have the proper language. So we're making the motion to approve the recommendations. Those are the written recommendations that everyone received attached on Friday to be passed as described in that recommendation report. These recommendations that are going to be delivered consist of 8 themes and 21 overall strategies, which drew from the breadth of backgrounds and ideas of our entire council membership. The recommendations also indicate which of the strategies the council believed were of the greatest priority, and you can see how we treated that in the written document. And then the staff will have the ability to make sure that communicate the intent of the recommendations if there's any need to make edits in that regard. So it's our guiding principles, it's the thematic areas and strategic ideas that everyone not only submitted but voted on, and then ultimately we also included the 5 priority areas that are in the earlier part of that document. And again, our intention when we present in 2 weeks is We will present it in total by theme and all the ideas there, and we will call out the 5, but those are not the exclusive list of what the governor and lieutenant governor are going to hear. And did you need, I don't know if did you see the slide of which the 5 priority areas were? Okay, let me read those over too. So they were produce new affordable housing, skilling, reskilling, and upskilling through industry partnerships, investments in opportunity youth workforce, ensuring broadband access throughout Minnesota, and creating a BIPOC small business ecosystem investment package. And thank you for putting them up on the screen, Nick, or whoever else did that. Okay. Would we now be ready to proceed with the roll call vote? Hearing no objection, Nick, please proceed.
Thank you. I'll be calling each of your names alphabetically by last name. Please indicate if you are for by yay and against nay, or if you abstain. Scott Burns.
Yay.
Brett C. Carter.
I'm a yay.
Jeff Edinger.
Affirmative, yay.
Joe Fowler.
Yay.
Brenda Hilbrick.
Yay.
Jody Hubler.
Yay.
Neil Kashkari.
Yay.
Marcus Owens.
Yay.
Talia Palmer.
Yay.
Juhi Pumplin.
I'm going to abstain. I don't feel I've been able to look at it close enough.
Nonoko Sato.
Yay.
Tracy Tapani.
Yay.
Bardi Wahi.
Yay.
Penny Wheeler.
Yay.
Paul Williams.
Yay.
That's 14 affirmative, 1 abstention. The motion carries.
Thank you, Nick. I'd like to turn the podium over for a minute to Paul for some comments maybe on this historic moment that we just passed.
Well, thanks, Jeff. I just, and Jeff said everything, I think, in his introductory comments. I just, I don't know if it's historic, but it certainly is fast moving. I mean, 8 weeks and just acknowledging how quickly we moved. I love the framing. I love the themes. I love where we landed on presenting the themes in kind of a ranked order. The 21 ideas, and then highlighting, our top priorities. So I like the way that we've framed this. I appreciate everyone's work in kind of getting to that. And I think it's very much a reflection when I think back on all the presentations we had. This is what we heard, right, from a wide range of folks who talked about these issues with real clarity. And so again, just recognizing, our inability to go really deep on any of these, and to the point, Bardi, about the parking lot. I think it's more like a parking ramp, right, with multiple levels of kind of deeper issues that I think we'll hopefully get into. I know we'll get into in this second phase. So I'm just really grateful for everyone's work on this, for leaning into it. Thankful to the staff for just literally sprinting to keep up with us. So excited for the work to come. More engagement, I think, ahead of us, and I like what we're taking to the governor and the lieutenant governor. I think it reflects what I've been hearing for a long time out in the communities that I'm in. These are the issues that are facing, and these are the issues that are critical to economic growth, to economic expansion. So I just say bravo for a job well done in a really short period of time, kind of in this first phase. So thanks, Jeff.
You bet, Paul. So let's talk a little about the presentation in 2 weeks. I want to thank you to each of the council members who volunteered to help present the survey, or in the survey that we handed out last week. Based on what we heard from you, we've put together a draft presentation agenda, and I just want to make a couple preparatory comments on that. The goal is to have as many council members as possible participate in describing the themes, but we're clearly not looking to compel or push somebody to present who's not comfortable presenting. We also, we kind of asked you a pretty open-ended question on that survey about what you'd like to talk about in front of the governor. When we look at the reality of a 1 hour time frame and 8 themes and 21 ideas, I mean, it's a pretty tight, pretty focused assignment of just a couple minutes per theme and time for Q&A. We feel we really should focus sort of on the why of each theme and less on exactly what the elements are. But in some cases, we've tried to sort of align what you stated as a preference and kind of put you into a theme that at least seemed to be related to it. But at this point, if we've either sort of mischaracterized and you're not comfortable with where you're showing up on there, or in the case there were 3 or 4 council members who did not put down any sort of preference at all, and we kind of took it to mean that you'd rather not present, but we don't want to be presumptuous about that. So if you do want to be part of the presentation, ideally we would have, say, 2 on each of our 8 theme areas. And so we're very open to either hearing out loud right now your reactions to potentially participating. You can contribute via chat if you're more comfortable doing that. You could send emails after this meeting to either me or Paul or senior staff if there's an area you want to present that you're not listed for, or if we've got you down for something that you don't think you'd be comfortable with. So as indicated here, however, the commissioner will provide the welcome. The governor and lieutenant governor may make some remarks at the outset, and then Paul and I will talk about sort of an overview and the process, and we'll walk them through the top priorities, and then we would hand it off to each of the thematic presenters to go over our 8 key theme areas. So open to input, discussion, any changes in the roster of presenters that anybody wants to advance at this point. One other consideration, not at all intended to be to dissuade anyone, but we have thought it probably would be helpful if presenters would be willing to do a practice run sometime between now and 2 weeks from now, and we don't have a specific date for that, but it would just, we want to make sure we use our time properly, but get our points across, and so that would be another ask of the participants. But clearly, whether you present or not, everyone is welcome and encouraged and expected to be there on December 1st with the governor and lieutenant governor. And I'm not looking at the chats. I only have one device today, so maybe staff or someone else can tell me if there's any chat recommendations right off the bat.
Yep, Jeff, Brenda Hilbrich asked if she could also present on healthcare, and we have added her. I will adjust that spelling. Sorry about that. And then Juhi is curious why I'm not on for small businesses, given it was my recommendation that moved to the top. And I suppose I could respond to that. We only assign people based on how they responded, if they were interested in presenting. So we didn't tie presenters to the ideas submitted. But certainly we can add you if you'd like to present on that.
We can, and I mean, I'd also throw out there if either Marcus or Scott have any interest in any others so I mean, we can have 3 on one of them. That was a detailed one, but we also could move some folks around to go to one of the other ones if that made any sense.
Can I ask, is it odd though that you would present when you didn't vote for the package?
That's a question to you, Julie.
I'm sorry. I abstained because I've not been able to keep up as well as I think it deserves. So it wasn't even clear to me. I appreciate Jeff taking the time to read me the motion, but it wasn't entirely clear to me what I was voting on even. So I don't think that's right for me to vote. It was an abstention.
I mean, absent any other alteration, I think we certainly can make it work out that there'd be 3 presenters for that item. We'll just have to figure out the times accordingly. There are a couple of the themes that only have one idea too. So when we really finalize the time frame, we can kind of find. Yeah, there's a hand, but I can't see who it's from.
It's me. I mentioned that I can move to youth engagement with Tracy.
Okay.
And give my spot there.
I mean, I think that'd be great if you're willing to do that and that works for you. That'd be great, terrific. Thank you, Marcus.
Jeff, I'd like to go back to Juhi and ask, Juhi, do you want to present on that? You said no, that's okay. And you didn't indicate that you wanted to present in the survey heading into this meeting. Do you want to present?
I indicated on the survey that I was willing to present, given that it was, if my recommendation went forward. And so it seems like it has. And so I think it makes sense. I'm not the best presenter either, so that it's hard for me to advocate for me to present, but so I'm fine. And I'm not very reliable these days, so.
Well,
okay, we can follow up offline and figure that out. Again, it was a top priority and it did rise to the top for many people.
So based on that, if you guys work offline, just let me know, Juhi, if you are going to, because if you are, I'll remove myself. But if you're not, I would like to go back to where I was at.
I'll just take a step back. Like I said, to be honest, in the end, I'm not that reliable right now. So that's great. I think you'll be wonderful, Marcus. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Juhi. And if you have any specific comments that you want to provide to Marcus or Scott as they prepare, that would be terrific also. And bear in mind also, we may get questions from the governor, lieutenant governor, and that may also prompt input from other council members. Okay. Was there anything else in the chat that I've not seen in terms of others either unvolunteering or volunteering for things that they like? I see somebody's hand. Barton, please.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I mean, maybe a best practice. I mean, so I talk about childcare a lot, so it's really not, I mean, it's something I do quite frequently, so I'm not super concerned, but I really do want to be able to hold the voice of the entire council as I present. So I think if there are thoughts or feelings, you all see the issue of childcare from your own vantage point. So please send that to me. And for heaven's sake, I guess I will just say, please chime in as you will during the presentation. But if there's anything you really want me to make sure that I'm uplifting or highlighting based on your own perspective, just feel free to send it ahead of time, and I will I will prioritize that piece. So.
Very good. Okay. And I think any other input or changes at this point?
No, Jeff, I was just going to say, I mean, there's a lot on here, a lot of topics on here, and I know that there's a lot even underneath the covers of the titling. So I've probably gotten a lot of this information already, but as you know, you look at the line that says workforce, and I know there's a lot in there. Just getting some items underneath that, just to kind of help frame some of the thinking ahead of time, so that when we do get together to do our practice run, kind of have a perspective on, what all we want to cover. Because again, it's just it'd be great if there was even just bullet points underneath it, so that you can kind of take your expertise and apply it. That's all I was thinking.
That's a great point, Brad. And I think our goal will be to have the staff take the first cut at some of the tight bullet points so they're consistent. But then clearly we'll be free to put our own flavor on what we want to emphasize in our, albeit short time frames.
I would just add there that, the governor, lieutenant governor will have read the report before coming to the meeting. So the weight of explaining the full scope of the recommendation will not be on the shoulders of each of these speakers. And I think it'll make for a more efficient meeting and a more effective meeting if we kind of tailor some of those remarks to maybe some of the context or the importance versus the specifics, because they'll have read that. And I think we'll help tee that up. We'll have staff help tee that up. And of course, we ask you bring your own words to it, but just to get that kind of context going in.
Thanks, Steve. Okay. Well, we do have a whopping 2 weeks to get this ready, which from our time frame is a lot, but it'll go quickly, and we have a holiday in the middle of it. So we appreciate the input today that's getting us closer to being able to present this in a meaningful manner. So we have the remainder of our time. We can talk about phase 2, which I think is great that we'll have a little more time to do this. So our thought right now, since the presentation to the governor and lieutenant governor is on December 1st, that we would then take a short recess as a council after we meet and not reconvene until January. We do want to hear from everyone today about how we should approach our phase 2 meetings. And we're going to talk about them in these small group conversations. But before we go into these breakouts, let's take a minute to review our phase 2 deliverables, if you will, and they're up on the screen here. So we have until June 30th, 2022 to submit a long-term roadmap for systemic change in the public, private, and nonprofit sectors that will achieve a more equitable, inclusive, sustainable, and resilient Minnesota economy. The council's actions and recommendations should also be informed by consultation with tribal, state, and local governments, businesses, workers, higher education institutions, nonprofits, grassroots movements, and communities that have been disproportionately impacted by inequitable systems of the past and by the pandemic. We're free to solicit, receive, and respond to feedback from workers, families, and communities that are representatives of Minnesota and of the administration's priorities for equity and inclusion. So in our small groups, we want to discuss the vision for what our work in phase 2 should look like. We're not going to, even based on today's input, I mean, this isn't like, okay, we're going to lock in the next 6 months today. This is a first shot at getting some input from folks. This should include a discussion on process, such as how often we should meet, whether we maybe should be thinking about going into subcommittees versus the full council, whether we might want to consider going on the road to hear from others, and any of those type of process items. But in addition to items of substance of how do we get to a meaningful long-term roadmap as described here in the phase 2. So we'll do our usual breakouts, and we'll have a staff member with each group, and their goal is to put our ideas together in an initial draft plan for the next phase. We'll have the Jamboard link as we used earlier in the meetings, and we will take I think we have about 45 minutes that we can do this, 45. We'll see how the groups are going at that point. If people think they're far enough along, just kind of send a chat notice and we'll convene the group back together. But let's otherwise go ahead and break into our small groups and talk about phase 2. And I don't know if it's possible I guess if that deliverable can be delivered all. Oh, it's always so abrupt. Just yanked out of the room. Well, let's do a report out. We cleverly implored Liz to do our report out since she was our note taker and captured our ideas probably better than we were. So we could start with that report out, and then we'll hear from the other two groups as well if that works for everybody.
I think a few people probably took the transition to take a quick 1 minute break.
Well, there's that too.
Yeah, I saw a couple of folks say, "Hold on, I'll be right back." So
yeah, okay. Maybe we should just wait a second too.
Hey, Jeff, could I take this minute to just make a quick announcement?
Yeah, absolutely.
I appreciate looking at the scoring that came through this week, that the idea of transforming the human service delivery system came in dead last with no dots. But I would just commend you to look at the front page of today's Star Tribune for an article that describes how we're transforming the human services delivery system anyway as we speak and already. So take a peek. Thanks.
That's great to see.
Wait, but does that mean that somebody who put the idea forward didn't vote for their own idea?
Only got 5 dots.
Well, but it is on the short. I mean, all these ideas are already the short list, right? So
yes.
Neil, it's Tracy Tapany, and I did not vote for an idea that I submitted in my top 5. So
well, good for you. You know, way to keep an open mind.
Okay, I think enough people are back. Maybe we could start the report out. So Liz, would you go ahead with ours?
Yeah, can people hear me all right?
Yes.
Sure. So our group sort of talked about it in 3 different ways. More generally, what's in scope and what's out of scope, some process considerations, and then really kind of what we want to hit home with at June 30th. So the scope, I think Jeff had a really good analogy of this transition from phase 1 to phase 2. It's kind of like a Venn diagram here, where you can think about there will be some overlap, but the scope is broader. Some things will carry over, and we'll have an opportunity to consider things that we didn't get to consider in the first phase, like education and really tap into mental health a little bit more. Just as some examples, clean energy as well. And then sort of how to look at how we approach our mandate. And then in the process, people were supportive of the ideas of subcommittees looking at this in sort of a long-term roadmap situation. Minnesota 2030 was kind of thrown around, and having something really be transformative and apolitical. And then in the outcomes, really talking about, do we approach this specifically or more philosophically and theoretically? And it's really getting at the systemic change and talking about what the outcomes actually are that was important to people. So one more thing I want to bring up is we talked a lot about the importance of community leaders and hearing from experiential learnings and lived experience as well. So that was our group.
If I could just add, and you captured some of it, there was a point Marcus made in our group that really resonated with us, which is, in round 1, we kind of did what to invest in, and there clearly will be elements of that in round 2, long-term investments. But given the whole idea of systemic change, we also need to hone in on what to change. What has gotten us to where Minnesota is today, and where do we want it to go tomorrow? So it isn't just the money. Okay, this another group would like to volunteer.
All groups. I'll report out for our group since we didn't ask anybody to take note. We had a note taker, but I think this is more a reflection of my facilitation today than anything else. We didn't get to all of our questions. We had a great conversation, though. I think a few things that I would point to. One, we spent a good bit of time, had a good discussion about the value of getting together in person in this next phase, the importance of relationship building, and recognizing just the nuance of that, given, you know, continued restrictions and possibilities, and wanting to make sure if we did that, that would work for everyone and not have that be, you know, an exclusive process in any way. So that was one set of conversations we had. Good points and good discussion on just wanting to understand the clarity. I hope I'll capture this kind of clarity on the end product and clarity on the process going forward. And everyone acknowledged, obviously, in an 8-week process, you know, it wasn't, you know, when will votes happen and what will the process be? And, you know, we'll have more time in this next phase, but wanting to have, and I agree with this, wanting to have some clarity on what we're working towards, kind of in terms of that end product. And several times, you know, I quoted, right, our charge, which is to build a long-term roadmap for system change, right, in the public, private, nonprofit sectors that will achieve a more equitable, inclusive, sustainable, and resilient economy. Big charge there. You can drive a truck through that. We talked about kind of the balance of wanting to hear from more real folks, kind of that lived experience conversation. We also had a really good conversation about balancing innovation and the need for innovation and creative thinking, and how you don't necessarily always get that in kind of these more rigid processes, and or asking folks who are in the thick of it to kind of innovate and kind of get out of that box. So we just kind of struggled with that. We didn't come to any conclusions on that, but really brought up both sides of that coin, or multiple sides of that coin. We had a good couple of comments around the desire to go deeper, and perhaps to take a few of these cornerstone issues that we've identified in some of these themes and ideas and really drive down and go deeper. We didn't talk about subcommittees or any kind of the structural pieces like that, but there are some cornerstone issues that our group talked about, where maybe in this second phase we really go deeper on those, and hear from a broader group of folks who are kind of expert in a particular area that can help us really get deeper on the caring professions were mentioned as one, childcare, healthcare. You know, these are kind of seminal issues in our economy, as just one example. That housing was kind of mentioned as another. And again, any number of our themes probably would lend themselves to that. And then the importance of intersectionality amongst different ideas, strategies, and themes, and needing to recognize and somehow incorporate that. So I think those were the things. Any other folks from my group? Anything I kind of missed in there that you felt passionate about? Okay, good.
I can go next.
Thank you.
Our group had some very interesting discussion. We kind of went both ways in terms of addressing the questions. What type of process might we look to for phase 2? So we had discussion around we can meet as needed. However, it might be beneficial to think about a different meeting cadence that just allow for a bit more breathing room. So anything from meeting every other week to maybe meeting 3 weeks in a row and having a planned break. So, you know, the staff can process the work, but it would also allow the council members a bit more time to balance the rest of their work. So just thinking how we can do it differently. I personally thought this meeting cadence, even though it was kind of quick and fast, it really worked. It forced us to get the work done. So I think that there are benefits to just a variety of meeting cadence. We can make it work. The overwhelming response from the group is that this is very important work and it does require time and it is worth supporting. Our group talked a little bit about the need for a visionary roadmap. There was discussion that the early meetings of the council were more visionary. The second half was more process, let's get it done. As the deadline approached, it kind of shifted how much time, how much effort, how much vision, and we started thinking maybe a bit more practical. And so it would be great in the second phase if we have an opportunity to really just do a deeper dive, really exploring all facets of the themes that we've discussed. We talked about what do we really want the state to look like in 2030 and make sure our actions are moving us closer to our goal vision. We talked about inviting other experts. We all recognize that we come to the table with a great deal of subject matter expertise, but it's not really quite a level playing field. And there are other individuals out there that know a whole lot more about some of these subjects. And so continuing to solicit input and engagement from real experts would be beneficial. So I thought it was, we didn't get to absolutely everything and fit it right into the nice bullet points, but it was a very good discussion. And we even talked about how do we hold each other accountable to ensure that all of this great work just doesn't get shelved at some time. I personally don't think it will get shelved. I think the contributions from this council have been significant, and it will really help the governor in making some tough decisions with a fixed set of resources. So I appreciated that because I've been around long enough to have served on different work groups. Some of the work, some of it does not. This is extremely important, and I am hopeful and confident that that won't be the result of this work group. Did I miss anything? Nope. I took a few liberties there. I hope the group don't mind.
So one aspect of how the process has worked thus far is, I mean, we clearly have had our meetings together once a week. We've had kind of a leadership group then that consists of the commissioners and then Paul and myself, and then clearly the staffers who we've been meeting almost another meeting every week, or maybe at the very least every other week on top of that, and kind of trying to move the ball forward based on what we hear from the council. There's nothing magical about just Paul and I being from the council on that group. So I mean, we would throw open the idea if there are other council members who would want to be part of the steering group, to at least in terms of process defining. It doesn't, it's not intended to cut out other council members at all in terms of the actual nuts and bolts of what we want to recommend. But if there's any of you who would be interested in playing that role, we certainly could be open to doing that. Anything? What else would people like to talk about today? We're actually ahead of schedule. Doesn't happen often, but And if not, we certainly go. Please, I see Tracy, your hand. Go ahead.
I just wanted to ask, you mentioned at the start of this meeting about the possibility of doing like a pre-meeting before the governor's meeting just to do a dry run. So if we're on the list of people that might be presenting, will we just get a schedule for that or something?
Yes, I mean, I think we would utilize our staff resources to try to find a time that would work the best for everyone. I mean, realistically, what we present on a Wednesday, I think, right? So, I mean, it could be as tight as the Monday before, given the holiday coming up, but we'll see what people have available. Any other comments or questions?
Well, I just wanted a moment to thank everyone for this, just on behalf of our commissioner team here, and I'm sure Jody and Rosin feel the same. We know this has been a very intense and extensive process, and we're just grateful. We've learned a lot just from hearing you all discuss and debate, and this is a great set of recommendations. I think that the Gov and LG are really going to get a lot from it, and just it's inspiring for those of us inside of government to see all of you giving of yourselves so selflessly to help us navigate a really, really challenging, unique time. So we're kind of nearing the end of phase one, but grateful for it and very excited as we've heard some of the thinking on phase two, what that will look like. So hats off to all of you, and just big thanks.
I just wanted to add, people wonder what happens after this, and last year, after the Blue Ribbon Commission was finished and several of their proposals ended up in the governor's budget, they were all marked as Blue Ribbon Commission ideas. And in our final negotiation, it made a big difference to people that they had been vetted by a whole group of community people from different areas who thought they deserved to be in their report. And so it really helped a lot toward the end, when you're getting down to it and negotiating the final budget, to have those marked as coming from the commission. So that's kind of the way this works in terms of many of your ideas getting all the way to the budget.
Well, Jeff, and I wanted to just again extend my thanks as well to everybody. Just really good work here in a short period of time on a wide range of critical issues. To Jeff's question a moment ago, I do hope that a handful of you might consider kind of joining some kind of steering team. We may do a little bit of recruitment if we don't hear from anybody. But I do think that's a good way to just kind of broaden the thinking. It's an imperfect science trying to piece together, process and so forth. But I think the more voices, the merrier. I also, just one thing that was mentioned in my small group that I think is a statement of the obvious, we really need to make sure that the values that were reflected, especially in kind of our guiding principles, really are kind of emphasized as we talk with the governor and the lieutenant governor, and kind of getting into 21 specific ideas, 8 themes. We kind of sometimes lose the principles around equity, the principles around in inclusion, and the principles around voice and so forth that is so important in kind of our process. So. We'll make sure that we're well prepared for that presentation.
Hey, Paul, can I just say my compliments to you and Jeff for the way you've managed this? I mean, I think we heard people have very different opinions and different experiences, and everybody brought their experiences to this. Getting everybody aligned was not trivial. And so I want to just compliment you both for creating a process that everybody could be part of, express themselves, but also move us forward to a conclusion. Well done.
It's been a great group to work with, and I look forward to the coming months as well. Any other comments anybody'd like to make? Questions? Otherwise, we'll give you 14 minutes back in your busy lives.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
So long.